Emotional and Spiritual Light in the Darkness, this wonderful series that Courtney helped us put together that we began with Dr. Kurt Thompson. And now Courtney is going to share spiritual practices. And so Courtney, I hope many of you know Courtney. She's just left to turn on the vestry, where she is reorganized along with Christine Gilbert, Christine Cords, now Gilbert, our adult Christian formation ministry, which is very exciting and working to do lots of things for us, diverse, multiple offerings online. And just they're doing such great work. And Courtney, thank you for your leadership there. Courtney is a well-known psychotherapist here, and in her practice, she incorporates spiritual practices for herself in her own life, and she shares them professionally and kind of guides her clients through it. So she's going to be our main person today and next week, and I want to thank her for her wisdom, for her passion. Courtney, thank you. And so to get us started,
before we begin, Andy, before we begin, can I just remind everyone that we are now recording this session?
Yes.
And I will also mute everyone. And we're doing this so that we can share it with the world later on and offer it to others who are unable to be with us right here. So for this initial part of our session, everyone apart from Courtney and Andy will be muted. And then I will leave it to Courtney to invite you in as well.
Right. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you.
And Andy, ask to unmute.
Okay. Thank you, Matthew, for keeping us all where we need to be and organized. You're so good to have on our team for many reasons. Let me begin with a prayer, this prayer that I like to use for my own contemplative spiritual practice. Let us pray. O God of peace, you teach us in returning and rest, we shall be saved. In quietness and in confidence, we know our strength, your strength. By the might of your Spirit, lift us now, we pray, to your presence where we may be still and know that you are God through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Courtney, just to kick us off, when we 2 weeks ago, we ended our session with Kurt, Matthew asked a great question about having Kurt talk about the way the brain is positively affected by spiritual practice, particularly the practice of meditation. And I think most of you know that my main spiritual practice is centering prayer, which is a contemplative prayer practice, one of many. There are many ways, many spiritual practices that are great. And this centering prayer was developed by Father Thomas Keating and others, drawing on the work of Thomas Merton, but it's been around for about 40 years. And Father Keating understood that connection. He understood the way we were made. God has made us wondrously and beautifully, and Father Keating's teaching on contemplative prayer is that if we will meditate in prayer twice a day for 20 minutes, God will do God's work, because we're not just meditating in a vacuum. I'd love to read something Thomas Keating said. He says, we may think of prayer as thoughts or feelings expressed in words. This is only one expression. Prayer is the opening of mind and heart, the whole being, to God, the ultimate mystery, beyond thoughts, words, and emotions. Through grace, we open our awareness to God in contemplative prayer, whom we know by faith is within us, closer than breathing, closer than thinking, closer than choosing, closer than consciousness itself. What a wonderful description of what we're doing, because we're not just, we're just not in the void. We're in this thing with God, where God is enveloping us and encompassing us in love. And Keating talks about God being the divine therapist, that when we have these practices, that our brains change, but we're able to begin getting to the deep places of creativity, but also of emotional woundedness where we've had. And these things are able to well up and we're able to integrate our lives. We're able to hold them in tension with our thinking self and our feeling self, and this great mystery of the brain. We and Courtney's going to talk about this more. So Courtney, one of the things that you teach in your practice is that the right and left hemispheres of the brain need to work in unison, and contemplative practices help us do that, because if we don't have them, we find such. Why is that important? Don't let me get ahead of you. So let me turn it over to you. I've said enough. You're the expert on this.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. No, that was a really great introduction. And I just want to, I loved Keating's words, something to the effect of, through grace, we can direct our awareness to God. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Like, if I can loosely, interpret grace as, like awareness of how our minds work, right? Like that's a gift that we can use to direct our awareness to God. And so I love his words. Those are great words. Yeah, so I do want to give a brief recap of Curt Thompson's 3 talks that he gave in January here. So if you'll remember, and I think a lot of you, maybe all of you were there, Curt gave a broad overview of the connections between neurobiology, the gospel, and our relationships with one another and with God. And so, as Andy said, today we're going to really zero in on the neurobiology piece and connect it to spiritual practices, which are a way of connecting to God. So that's kind of a broad overview of what we're going to do. The first bit of our time, I'm going to do a brief review of basic brain structure. And then the second part of our time, I'm going to lead us through a mindfulness experience, which, in this case, I would say mindfulness and spiritual practice would be interchangeable today. And at the end, I do want to give us a little bit of space, obviously, for questions. But for anyone who wants to share, I would like to hear your personal reflections on our mindfulness exercise that we're going to do. So that's what we're going to do. And, I actually do want to go ahead and put up in the chat, really my references for today. What I'm drawing on heavily from today. Oh, well, now I can't seem to post it. Okay, whatever. I'll get those to you guys in a different way. But I do want to reference the work, obviously, of Curt Thompson, but also Dan Siegel, who's a neuropsychologist in California. That's who I'm going to be drawing on heavily today. Okay, so let's dive into brain structure. I'm going to really oversimplify a very complex part of the body. I'm going to leave a whole lot of things out. And I invite you to Google all the things that I don't talk about today. But just for our purposes for today, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. So, as we all know, the brain is divided into 2 hemispheres, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. Now, the right hemisphere is where we receive nonverbal communication. It's where we think metaphorically. It's where we are aware of the experiences of our bodies. It's where we store our memories, in part, but our emotional memories from earlier experiences. It's kind of vague, kind of amorphous, right? What the right hemisphere does. It'll make more sense in a minute. The left hemisphere, which we're far more familiar with, it does all the things that begin with L. It is where we form our language. It is where we create labels for things in our environment. And it's where we engage in linear and logical thinking. So when the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere work in concert with each other, when it goes well, we say that we are operating in an integrated state. When there's disconnect, when the two hemispheres are not working in concert, we say that we're operating out of a disintegrated state. So let me give you an example, a real life example, which may or may not have actually happened, but just to illustrate the point. Let's say that I have just concluded my last meeting on the vestry, wrapping up my 3-year term as a vestry member. And let's say Andy comes up to me afterwards and says, "Oh, Courtney, we have so appreciated you on the vestry. Your contributions have been invaluable. You're so smart, so wise, so funny. We're just going to miss you so much. I don't know what we're going to do without you." So let's say that happens. In the moment, I'm aware of like this warm, fuzzy feeling in my chest, maybe a little bit of warmth in my cheeks. And I don't know what the feeling is, but it's good. I may, in the back of my right hemisphere, have a vague memory of other times where I have felt valued or loved or appreciated, but it's kind of vague, but it is there, right? So Andy's words are the data being received by my right hemisphere. And that data is evoking all sorts of responses in me. But you notice like it's all pretty vague. So then this is where the left hemisphere comes in and interprets the experience and says, "Oh, Courtney, Andy really appreciates your time and effort. Oh, you're a valuable member of the vestry. Oh, people like you at the Falls Church Episcopal." This is the meaning that my left hemisphere makes of my right hemisphere's experience. The left hemisphere makes up a story, right, about what the right hemisphere has just experienced. So what I have just described is an integrated experience, right? Now I could describe, and I could go down the rabbit trail, which would be helpful another time, to describe a disintegrated experience of the same event. But today we're going to stay, in the realm of the integrated. Okay, so what's the connection between right and left hemisphere and integration and spiritual experience? We have deeper and richer spiritual experiences when we are operating out of an integrated state, right? So that's a main point. The problem is, in our very left brain culture, we are often cut off or don't understand very well the experiences of the right brain. So what can we do about that? Well, for lack of a better way of putting it, we can exercise our right hemispheres so that we can have a greater ability to have integrated experiences, say through spiritual experiences. Like conversely, so what I'm saying is, we can exercise the right hemisphere, and we can do that through spiritual practice. That strengthens our ability to have integrated experience. But on the flip side, if we can be more integrated and have a stronger right hemisphere and more integration, we can it's a reciprocal relationship, right? So what we want to kind of transition into now is an experience that I think, Andy?
Yeah, could I just ask a question? This is something that you've probably heard me say, I think I may have said it in a sermon recently, but, is it kind of the the mind without a heart and the heart without a mind kind of thing that we oftentimes say as God's people, that it takes both? That
Yes.
we need our minds and our hearts to be integrated.
Right.
And another way to put that language.
Yep, that is another way of thinking about it, right? Because emotional memories rest in the right hemisphere, the heart, so to speak, right? So yeah, that's exactly right. That's where that kind of metaphorical language comes from.
Thank you. I just wanted to
yeah.
use that. That's what it could be.
Yeah, it is.
Of describing it. Okay.
It is. So what is this exercise? Like, what could an exercise look like, right? Where we are exercising integration. Well, Dan Siegel in his book, Mindsight, it describes this method by the acronym of SIFT. And through the method of SIFT, we can give ourselves some good practice at operating out of an integrated mindset. So what does SIFT stand for? It stands for sense. Like, what do you sense in the room? Do you sense tension in the room? Do you sense excitement in the air? I is for image. What do you image, or what do you see? Either with your mind's eye or literally in front of you, what do you see? F is for feel. What emotions do you feel? The 4 basics are happy, or glad, sad, mad, and scared. And then all the derivatives of those. What do you feel emotionally? And also, what do you feel in your body? I feel heaviness in my chest. I feel tightness in my shoulders. And then the T is the easiest. We all do this so well. What are your thoughts? What do you think? What are your assessments? What are your judgments? What are your beliefs? What are your questions? SIFT, sense, image, feel, and think. So you'll notice sense, image, and feel are right hemisphere activities, primarily. Think is a left hemisphere activity. You put all those 4 together and you're having an integrated experience. Okay, so how do we SIFT? We can SIFT really any life experience, whether it's a past one or a current one. And today I want to lead us through an exercise of sifting a past experience, specifically an experience of joy. Why an experience of joy? Because, well, we believe that God is a part of any experience of joy that we have in life. And so as we're sifting an experience of joy, we're also going to be sifting an encounter with God. So now we're going to transition. We're going to transition to this experience. And a couple disclaimers up front. Number one, like SIFT is a great foundation upon which you can do some shifting and changing and tailoring to suit your own spiritual practice. And that is what I have done. So you're going to notice today that I change the order of things a little bit and I add in a whole lot of things. So I would invite you to do the same if you'd like to do that with SIFT. Also, I want to say, as far as like our togetherness right here, right now, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. And it might feel weird to close your eyes when you're doing this, this practice with the camera on. So if you feel more comfortable, you're free to turn off your camera if that feels more comfortable to you. I would also say too that, you know, mindfulness practice, especially if you don't do it very often, or if you haven't done one quite in this way, it's pretty difficult, or it can be pretty difficult. And in rare occasions, it could even lead to a little bit of distress. So I want to go ahead and give permission to anyone who this just doesn't work for you today. You're not in the space to do this today. Something feels off about this today, to just bow out. I want to make sure everyone feels free to do that. Okay. So I'm going to describe what I'm going to do, and then we're going to start it together. Okay. I'm going to lead you kind of like through through the lobby of an experience. I'm going to like set us up for the SIFT experience by directing your awareness to different parts of your environment, like right now. Then I'm going to lead us into your experience of joy. And then I'm going to lead us back out of your experience of joy, back into the lobby, so to speak, directing your awareness to your environment. It's a way of like softening the takeoff and the landing. You'll see what I mean in a moment. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. For those who want, you can turn your cameras off or not. It's up to you. And go ahead and get in a comfortable space. Make sure that you're seated in a position and in a chair that is comfortable enough for you. And if you prefer not to close your eyes, it's also an option to just find a fixed point that you can stare at. That also is helpful. And once you get comfortable and you have found a point of focus or your eyes are closed, I invite you to take 2 deep breaths, taking care to inhale as fully as you can and exhale as fully as you can. And now just take a moment to settle into your seat. Make any adjustments you need to make. Resuming, maintaining your normal breath. And now I invite you to direct your awareness to the virtual room that you inhabit with others. We're not together physically, but we are spiritually. Next, I invite you to shift and direct your awareness to the physical room in which you sit. What is the temperature of the room? What are the sounds in the room? Shifting again, I want to direct your awareness to your body, to the weight of your body in your seat, to the posture of your hands, arms, shoulders, neck. And now I want to direct your attention inward more still to your breath. Notice your breath without judgment. Is your breath shallow? Is it deep? Is it quick? Is it slow? Allow your breath to be where it is, with no pressure to change. And now shifting into our experience of joy. I invite you to flip through your memories, almost like postcards. Find an experience of joy that you would like to explore more deeply today. And once you have found that memory, I invite you to go back to that moment. Set yourself down right in the middle of that memory of joy. And look around. What do you see? Are you indoors or outdoors? What are the objects before you, both near and far? Is anyone else present with you? What do you hear? Sounds in nature, a person's voice. If so, what are they saying? Are there aromas in the air that you notice? What is the temperature? Do you feel cool or warm? Hot? Is there a breeze? And next, what do you sense? Do you sense calm around you? Do you sense excitement? What else? What do you feel? What emotions are you aware of? There may be several. What do you feel in your body? And shifting now to thoughts. What are your thoughts? What are your beliefs in that moment of joy? What are your discoveries? What are your observations? And finally, I wonder, is there anything you want to say to God in this moment? Or is there anything you want to ask? Now, for a few more moments, I want you to remain in this experience of joy, noticing what it is that you sense, that you image, that you feel, that you think. Continue to absorb the experience for a few more moments before we start to conclude. You're remaining in the moment, noticing everything that you're experiencing. So now it's time to shift. And I want to invite you in your moment of joy. I want you to take in whatever it is in that moment that you want to bring back with you. Whether it's an image or a sound or a feeling or a discovery. Imagine that you are taking hold of it and bringing it towards you so that you can bring it back to the present moment. So now it's time to shift. It's time to leave the experience of joy and direct our awareness to the breath. Notice your breath without judgment. Notice its rhythm, its constancy. And now notice your body. Notice its posture, its weight. And now notice the room in which you are sitting, the sounds, the light, the temperature. And now become aware again that you are also in a virtual room with others, fellow parishioners, friends. And when you feel ready, and only when you feel ready, I invite you to end your exercise by taking 2 deep breaths and opening your eyes and returning fully to our room. Okay, so that concludes our exercise. I'm wondering, for those who are open to sharing, what did you notice? What was hard? What was interesting? What was weird? What did you notice? Well, everyone, it's good to see you all again. I see a couple of new faces, but I think a lot of you were here last week, which is great. Today it's going to be kind of content heavy. I hope it won't be too much, but I really want to give you guys an opportunity to engage in 2 experiences, which I think you'll find to be helpful and interesting and rewarding. So I do want to just do a brief review of last week, just to catch us up. So last week, we learned that we can use what we know about the brain to enrich and deepen our spiritual lives. We learned about the SIFT method. SIFT is an acronym. It stands for S is for sense, I is for image or see, F is for feel, as in your emotions or your bodily sensations. And T is for thoughts. And last week we used SIFT to remember an experience of joy. And we all did this by first getting into a calm and mindful state. And then we recalled each of our individual experiences of joy. And then we entered into the experience asking ourselves what it is that we were sensing about this experience of joy, whether it was excitement in the air or a sense of calm. We noticed what it is we imaged or saw in this memory of joy. We noticed the feelings that came up for us in this memory of joy, and we noticed our thoughts, whatever those were, as we re-experienced this moment of joy. So that's what we did last week, and we're going to do a version of that 2 different times this week. And so let's dive into what we're going to do today. So today we are going to sift a poem selected and read by your own Reverend Andy Anderson. And we are going to integrate SIFT into an Ignatian spiritual exercise. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Ignatian spirituality. I'm only somewhat familiar, but we're going to, Ignatian spirituality is really intuitively compatible with what we know about the brain today. So those are the 2 things we're going to do today. So first, let's start with why sift a poem. Well, poems are powerful in their ability to evoke sensations, images, and feelings. We don't need help coming up with thoughts, but poems do evoke thoughts as well. Poems are also usually not prescriptive. Poems leave a lot unsaid. And therefore, our brain has to work really hard. Our left hemisphere specifically has to work very hard to make sense of word sequences that aren't usually found together. And our right hemispheres have to work very hard to interpret metaphor, to imagine scenery, and to process emotions that are brought up by poetry. And so that's why we've chosen to do a poem today. But you can sift other things too. You can sift visual art, right? Visual art, paintings, sculpture, textiles, architecture. These are things you can sift too. Like poetry, visual art is often not prescriptive. You have an image in front of you or an object in front of you, but there is a lot of room for interpretation. Right? One experience I would highly recommend, if no one has done it already, if you go to the East Gallery, when we can go to galleries again, right? Go to the East Gallery of the National Gallery of Art. Top floor is the Rothko room. It's somewhat new. I think they've moved all the Rothkos up into that room. These are huge, bold, colorful works of art by Mark Rothko. And to be sitting in a relatively small room surrounded by these amazing works of art, it is powerful. So when we can go to galleries, I highly recommend that you do that. We can also sift music. I think all of us are probably familiar with the experience of feeling things when we're listening to music, right? You can sift listening to music. I recommend, gosh, I'm sure we all have a recommendation, right? But like just one taste of this would be listen to the introduction of Requiem by Gabrielle Fauré. It's like 2 minutes long, maybe, but it oh yeah, Alicia knows what I'm talking about. It grabs you by the throat. That just is a little taste of what it could be like to sift music, right? What are other things? Oh, you can sift current experiences. A walk in the woods, right? We can do that right now.
If you want to more fully engage in experience, or maybe make it more easy to remember it, or to kind of ground yourself in an experience when you're feeling wobbly in life, go sift a walk in the woods. Especially right now with the coldness of the air, in the very winter landscape. Sift a walk in the woods now and then do it in the spring and compare the experiences. And sifting and Ignatian exercise, let me say a little bit more about that. So, St. Ignatius in his great wisdom just intuitively knew what science now confirms, which is when we engage our imaginations in an experience, specifically in this case, when we engage our imaginations to encounter Jesus through scripture, we really experience Jesus in a deeper and more dynamic way. And so, that's why we've chosen an Ignatian exercise today, but there are lots of other Ignatian exercises, and I'll try to remember to give you a reference, but where to find more about it. But IgnatianSpirituality.com is a website hosted by Loyola Press, and it is excellent for more information about Ignatian spirituality, practical things about exercises. I highly recommend IgnatianSpirituality.com. So before I move on, just want to see if there's any brief questions about anything I've said so far.
Courtney, thank you. I sifted Morricone's Gabriel's Oboe this week. It was beautiful, beautiful piece of music that's always moved me emotionally, and I wanted to kind of see what came out of that. So there's a piece of music that grabs you, that touches you in the deep place of your heart. This is a great exercise to glean wisdom from why that is happening in your body and in your emotions. Also, now we got Porter online. I'm in this preaching group for clergy that he's just started and graciously giving him his time. And we're doing short stories in addition to poetry. And so short stories are another experience to sift as well. So,
oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, that's a great idea. So, definitely. I'll have to check out that piece of music. That's a good recommendation. Okay, so let's go ahead and move into our first experience, which is sifting a poem. And I think before we begin, I want to say a brief word about distractions. I wish I had said it last week, but I'll say it now. So distractions happen. They happen a lot. And you have to be pretty practiced in mindfulness to minimize distractions. And so they're just going to happen, And when you notice during our exercises today that your mind wanders, I want to encourage you to, first of all, reserve judgment, to be kind to yourself, and to gently draw your attention back to our exercise. And I'll give you an image to use if you want to use it. It's one that I find to be helpful. But I like to imagine that I am standing in front of a stream on a fall day, and then I'm watching leaves fall from the trees into the stream. And as I watch these leaves land in the stream, I notice as they drift away from me down the stream. And so I like to imagine that whenever a distraction comes up, I can simply pick it up and place it on a leaf and watch it float away. So if you want to use that little image, feel free to do so. But whatever you do, be kind to yourself. That's just how the brain works, and it takes practice to get it to stay in one place. So I just want to put that out there. Okay, so let's get down to it. Let's get ready to sift a poem. First, as I said last week, if you feel more comfortable doing this with your camera off, so you have more privacy, please feel free to turn your cameras off right now. And then get comfortable in your seat. If you need to make any adjustments to be more comfortable, go ahead and make those adjustments now. And then I would invite you to close your eyes, or at least find a fixed spot that you can rest your eyes on. And now I invite you to take 2 deep breaths. And as you inhale, allow your lungs to completely fill with air. And as you exhale, allow them to empty. And when you resume your normal rate of breath, just rest in the stillness for a moment. And now, Andy, I would ask that you do our first reading of our poem. And you are on mute.
You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Wherever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things.
Now just allow those words to soak in. And notice the experience of allowing them to soak in. Now, Andy, I would invite you to do our second reading, our second and final reading again.
You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies, and the deep trees, the mountains, and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things.
And now notice, what do you sense as you allow these words to sink in? What images are formed in your mind's eye. What emotions do these words evoke? What sensations do you notice in your body? What are your thoughts, your observations, your judgments, your longings? Remain here for a few moments, just noticing. And as distractions arise, I invite you to place them on a leaf and watch them float away. It's now time to end this experience. But if there is something that you want to bring back with you, I would invite you to gather it up now. And then, as we began, take 2 deep breaths, completely filling your lungs with air as you inhale, completely emptying your lungs of air as you exhale. And as you resume your normal rate of breath, I invite you to end our exercise by opening your eyes and returning fully to the room. Okay.
The poem was Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. Courtney, I changed poems on you.
That's okay.
I debated using that poem or Wendell Berry's The Peace of Wild Things. Both, but this one was speaking to me as we particularly enter Lent with that opening image. So that's the poem if you wanted a reference for the poem.
So let's go ahead and shift now then into a very different exercise. This one will be a little bit longer. And this is going to be an Ignatian spiritual exercise, and it's going to focus on the first chapter of the Gospel of John and a familiar moment in Scripture where John the Baptist calls out Jesus, basically. And I'm going to read that scripture, and then I'm going to draw us into an imagination that we are now in that scripture, participating in a more full way. So, as before, get ready, turn off your cameras if you'd like to do so, and then get comfortable in your seats. And then once you're comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes or find a fixed spot on which to rest them. And then go ahead and take 2 deep breaths. filling your lungs with air and emptying your lungs with air. And as you resume your normal rate of breath, just rest in the stillness for a moment. The next day, John again was standing with two of his disciples. And as he watched Jesus walk by, he exclaimed, "Look, here is the Lamb of God." The two disciples heard him say this, and they followed Jesus. When Jesus turned and saw them following, he said to them, "What are you looking for?" They said to him, "Rabbi," which translated means teacher, "where are you staying?" He said to them, "Come and see." They came and saw where he was staying, and they remained with him that day. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So just allow those words to sink in. Now I invite you to imagine that you are walking along a country road in the early morning. You notice what do you see around you? What do you hear? What do you feel? Take a moment and give thanks and praise to God for the beauty of creation. Now, as you walk down the road, you notice that you're gaining on a man walking slowly, reflectively ahead of you. Take in the sight of him, his clothes, his posture, his gait. Now, notice when he turns and says to you, "What do you want?" Look into his face as he asks this question of you. What do you want? What do you see in his expression, in his eyes? What do you sense between you? What do you feel as you take in his words? Now imagine that you say to him, "Rabbi, where do you live?" And he says to you, "Come and see." You walk together to his home, where you stay for the remainder of the day. What do you do together during this time? Imagine that now. Do you sit together and talk? share a meal, anything else? What do you have a need to say to Jesus in this time together? What does he say to you? Linger here in this conversation. Take in each word, each expression. And as distractions enter in, place them on a leaf and watch them float away. The day is coming to a close now, and it's time to leave. As you take leave of Jesus, what are your last words to him? What are his last words to you? Now imagine that you leave through the gate of his house and begin walking down the road. What do you feel? What do you sense? What are your thoughts? It's time now to draw our exercise to a close. So I would invite you to gather up anything you want to bring with you. Gather it closely to you. And as we begin, take 2 deep breaths. When you resume your normal rate of breath, I invite you to open your eyes, turn on your cameras if you wish, and end our exercise.